Welcome to Free Human, a podcast where we explore the intersection of creativity, self-actualization, and the dharmic path. I'm Indigo, a dharma coach, medicine woman, and multidisciplinary artist. I guide humans through the process of remembering their true self so they can live in alignment with their soul. You are art that breathes. Your life is art. It's your intimate relationship with self and the universe. Every feeling, thought, movement, experience, and creation is your art. Your soul is singing a song, and the notes are weaving through the universe. To sing your soul song is to be free. This podcast is the fire circle in my Dharma garden, a place where we share our soul stories and medicine, nurture our curiosity, and weave our prayers into the collective. Thank you for being here. I am very grateful. Hello, friends. I'm welcoming Hannah Dubner to this episode of the Free Human podcast. She is my dear friend and will be a reoccurring guest, which I'm super stoked about. Hannah is an embodiment guide, innovative artist, and creativity coach who believes compassion and creativity are a direct path to collective freedom. After an epic shoulder dislocation in an acting class, Hannah desperately searched for a way to heal and enjoy living in her body. Enter yoga, and she was off. A forever learner, Hannah is a 300-hour certified yoga teacher, Reiki practitioner, Theravada meditation teacher, trauma-informed coach, and breathwork guide. Okay, a few more things about Hannah. She is a master of play. When I'm in Hannah's presence, it is another world. She somehow creates a space through example that feels so safe that your inner child can come out in ways that you may not have accessed as an adult. It's like new ways of play, movement, joy, and expression emerge out of you, and while it's happening, you are surprised at what you are witnessing within yourself. She is wildly creative and such a beautiful out-of-the-box explorer of the beauty in life. Her magic is palpable and contagious. Okay, so I want to mention one thing about creating art, about creating this podcast. In my previous profession as a creative director, everything had to be absolutely perfect before it went out to a client or the world. It's been quite a journey to prioritize imperfect doing. When we hit record for the first time on my podcast, I had no idea how to introduce the guest. I just kept laughing before we hit record. We were riffing on what to talk about and then somehow just began. So welcome to my imperfect start to something that feels so perfect, as in human, as in real, as in from my heart. Enjoy this open-ended, free-flowing conversation about how to traverse the yin and yang of creating self and birthing our creations into the world. You want to start on one of the questions you had?
Yeah, I really liked the last one that you threw into the mix because it seems like relevant, tangible. So you threw it in the mix. How do you develop healthy creative practices?
Yeah. Well, first you develop unhealthy ones so that you can feel what it's like to be unhealthy. Maybe you go through chronic illness and then you get to like rock bottom. And then from there, then you're like, oh, what's healthy mean? And then you start the journey to learning new ways of being.
And I think along the journey, you then get caught up in trying to be really healthy. And you think that really healthy is a form of perfectionism and rigidness, and perhaps getting obsessed with all the tools And so you spend a lot of time trying to set up the perfect container so that you're having a healthy creative habit. And then you realize it's just as unfun as it was to have an unhealthy creative habit. And
Exactly.
then,
Yeah. Like you go from one constriction to the next.
yeah, yeah. And you swing back and forth for a little while. And then I really do think creativity, like anything else, is a middle way, a middle way that's not as sexy as either of the extremes, but it doesn't mean that you don't hang out in imbalances. It just means that there's a desire for there to be balance in the creative process for me, where it's like, I'm not going to spend too much time creating container and I'm not going to spend too much time it just kind of like doing whatever I want without any structure. And that changes from season to season. So it's like knowing where I am in my life and what's needing nurturing. And I think it also brings up the question of like, why are you doing these creative practices? Like what's the intention or desire behind it?
Yeah. So, okay. So for me to answer this question, I feel like I should explain like my origin story of my creative practice. And being a professional creative for 20 years. I would say probably the first 18 years of that 20, I had a similar creative practice, and but it was contained within like a job. Like I had to be somewhere and sit at a desk as a creative director, as a graphic designer, a digital artist. I worked on a computer and I worked for a business. So therefore I sat within that space, and so I had that constriction of sitting. I had time constrictions.
Mm,
So I didn't have like control over um my like I couldn't flow with the rhythms in the seasons and everything, right? So there's like that really structured repetitive nature, which is most people's like jobs, right? And so I learned how like to it was almost like I was always in this rigid structure, but then within the rigid structure I built a secondary world in
hmm.
which it did have like an ebb and flow, like
Hmm.
micro ebbs and flows, but it was all inside of like my mind. And so I learned how to cycle in and out of flow states, and even just having different practices, but always within the confounds of having to be at a desk with a certain amount of hours per day focusing. And I learned so much from that level of constriction because
Hmm.
it was like I had to find a place within there to expand exponentially. So I had like inside of my mind, like the creative space was like really, 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 really large, even though from the outside it was like highly constrictive. I mean, like graphic design is probably, some people don't even like say that it's like art and design are different things. So it's like, um, you could have an entire team of people managing what your artwork looks like, right? You're on a team with multiple people at all times. You're um like you're like a ghost, you're like the ghost writer of the design world. Like, and so it's you're never doing it for yourself. It's always with other people. And so my mini world like existed within that other world. And so I think in retrospect, I'm really glad that it happened like that because I can go into a flow state or into a world like literally almost like snapping my finger because of it. Because I always had like forced focus. Like I
Hmm.
had to focus, like I had to get it done. There's always like a strict time deadline. And so when I left my profession, And then I was like, just basically broke open into the like really, really, really wide world of creativity. Um, I kind of swung, I would say, like all the way. It took me a minute, but I eventually swung all the way out into the like complete flow state where every single thing I chose to do, I was like in flow out in the world. Like I was like flowing not just through the computer, not just through digital art, but I started to flow through my body. I started to flow through like my speaking and everything that was like actually in physical tangible reality. So I started to like interact in that way, but it wasn't just like me creating art. It was actually like me creating myself in
Mm.
that space. So it broke all the way to the other side.
Hmm. I'm curious about this flow state because I think a lot of people have different experiences with flow, whether they're an athlete or an artist. So you're in this constricted environment, and how do you access this expansive flow state in your mind? Like, what does that expanding process look like? And what's the quality or experience like that you knew you were in a flow state?
I would say that I became aware, and I think probably multiple things, but definitely plant medicine allowed me to see
Hmm.
that it like widened my perspective to see that at any moment, like a flow state is actually being like really lucid with yourself in like the present moment. And it's like, so it's like flow, like to me isn't like disassociative or I'm a lost. I'm like highly lucid in my flow states. So like it's like if I'm walking down the street and I see like a branch on a tree and I think it's beautiful and I'm like interacting with it, it's like it like that experience of having like a visceral, like emotional experience with anything, including just like a tree branch, is like available to us at all times. So then it was like, oh, I have choice in this. Like, how do I interact with every single thing that is occurring? And then I was
Mm.
like, oh, actually, how I interact with these things is art. It's my art. It's which is my life. And so it's like, and of course, like not at all moments are we walking around going like, wow, wow, wow. Like we're not at like the peak of like a flow, like every single moment. But it when you know that, like I think that it's like it's a choice that like you can tap into like quite often, and then
Mm.
it just like you get better over time, right? Like anything, like the more you practice doing that, the more it becomes like how you live.
Mm. I love this idea of flow state having choice of how you interact with everything around you. And I feel like a lot of what my experience with creativity early on, I'll just speak to one part of it, but like growing up, my dad is a pianist, incredible self-taught musician, one of those people who can just pick up any instrument and kind of have a relationship with it. And my experience with music was very similar in a sense of I was hearing something on the piano and I would just respond with my voice and I would be having a conversation. Now, I couldn't tell you what I was saying. I couldn't track it. It wasn't coming from my mind. It was coming from responding from my heart, from a space of freedom and joy and wonder and an openness. And for me, one of the telltales that I can tell that the flow state is off, which is helpful to be able to sense like where am I coming from, is that I still feel like I have choice. Like, I think about singing later in my life after I had had a ton of music training, a ton of music theory, and it had come through the mind of like, this is the math of it. And for some people, that is their flow state. They can enter through there and it starts to feel like this wandering puzzle that they're unfolding. But for me, that disconnected me from my sense of trust that I could respond and choose and interact with life from my heart. And so it's been a process of noticing when I am interacting with stimulus, with life, with music in a way that is coming from my mind and trying to result orient around something, or if I'm responding and choosing to respond. I think that's where the choice is for me. I have a choice to drop into my body, into my heart, and respond from meeting the moment, not knowing where it's going to go. And of course, that's tricky with deadlines, with papers due, with current life. And at the same time, I find that if I don't have spaces where I can not know what the painting is going to be, there will be no painting because I'm overwhelmed from the get-go.
So, wow. So you were able to drop into your heart and body and express like that as a child. That's like, that's really incredible. And, I've known you for a while, and like that seems to have like gone with you throughout your life. And so I would love to hear more about this because, you seem to like have like different, I don't know if I want to call them categories, but it's like whenever you show up to a space, you have like all these different ways that you have really
Mm,
diverse ways you interact with people and spaces. And
mm,
they are not just through your spoken word. So how did that like continue, and like what is that to you?
mm. For me, I think a part of this ability to connect with people in different ways came from adversity, which is that I grew up an only child in the woods, and my parents gave me so many things, and perfect emotional attunement was not was not present. Which, like, I don't know who gets that. And I was looking for connection. I was seeking connection. And so I was seeking connection in the trees. I was seeking connection in the birds. I was seeking connection in the adults that would come over. I was seeking connection in the kids at school. I wanted to feel connected. And something I would say to my mom all the time, especially when I would get upset, was, I want to go home. I want to go home. And she was like, where is home? We are home, in our physical home. And I would point at her belly. And the truth is, I think now I've been able to realize that I wanted to go into this space of oneness, of being able to connect with everything. And because disconnection felt so painful, I wanted to learn every possible language that I could so that I could speak to any and all creatures so that I could feel that connection. So while I think that looking for connection outside of yourself can be painful, it can also be beautiful. And I think the byproduct of that time of really not feeling at home in myself was that I learned to speak other languages and attune to other people and figure out a way to connect to the part of them that could maybe connect both of us to this space of oneness. And as I've gone on in my life, I've noticed that a big portal for me is play. That's a big thing I've had reflected back to me that people receive from me. And it's also a big part of how I choose to interact with myself, because it reminds me of that openness, that sense of possibility, that lack of striving, that like, oh, we just doing this for the fun. We're not trying to win. And even if we are trying to win, it's like fun to try to win. It's not like I'm going to die and perish if I don't win this, which is how it feels as an adult. You're like, oh, I'm going to play the game, try to get a job. Like, that's cool. It's not like I'm going to get the job or I'm going to die. And, you know, some people, that's their reality. And like, I don't know what that's like. And the way that we interact with life is the game. That's the game. Yeah.
Well, I loved what you said about how like you felt like you were trying to connect yourself and other people to the oneness, like through this experience. Like, I think that this aspect of you, do you feel like this aspect is like a part of your dharma?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I was chatting with a friend yesterday, a few days ago, and she was like, my experience of being around you is like you're pointing out, like I'll be looking at something and then I'll look at you and I'll be like, that's a door. And I'll be like, it's a door. You said it was a door. You can walk through. And then if I'm like, oh no, I don't want to walk through. I'm like, okay. And I think that I find a lot of joy in pointing out doors to people and being like, yeah, you can walk through, you can not walk through. You could swing on the door. You could rub your ass against the door. Like, you don't have to interact with this door in any particular way. And actually, the joy of the way you interact with the door, how you enjoy it, whether it's pleasant, unpleasant, whatever it is, that's you having an experience with yourself. And that's what I'm interested in, is having an experience with the process of life with each other. Because I do really resonate with that Ram Dass quote that I'm going to butcher, but that we are walking each other home and pointing out doors and rocks and, you know, and sometimes just birds. And it's just, there's no rush. We're not going to get a medal for getting to death the quickest. So you might as well like stop, look around, enjoy, have a snack.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you break people out of their like cycles, their rhythms, that they're like living in like circular patterns that like, but you don't break them in a way that's like, hey, guess what? Like you're doing this thing over and over and it's really annoying. Like you're just like you're just like through your own embodiment, you invite them to come out of their regular rhythms. And so, but it's so inviting that it like pulls you out of it right away. And through that experience, like you were saying, like how do you interact with a door? It's like so many people think there's just like maybe have like one or two or maybe three ways to interact with the door, and you're like, hey, there's 25. And so you're like, you're opening up such a like creative portal for them to like rewrite their patterns and stories and like actually start to walk through like new ways of being through just being in your presence.
Thank you. Receiving that. That's so yummy. I will say, like, that is something I really love. I feel very gifted in seeing 1,000 ways to interact with a door. and with life. And much like any gift, there is an underbelly to it. There can be an imbalance, and it's been a real process because I enjoy the process of experiencing the door so much or trying out different things. Moving my ass through the door can be challenging because I'm enjoying so much all of the infinite possibilities. And yeah, that's something that I really admire about you, is that I feel like you have this unique balance of creating containment and structure and processes that you can rest in, as well as so that they support a vastness and expansiveness, a space for anything to happen. And I'm curious about, has that always been a balance that you've kind of landed in, or have you had times where there's been more structure? I know that your sessions, hope I'm not giving you away too hard, but you talk about how a lot of it is you showing up in the moment and responding to what's in front of you instead of using a set model. So how did you get comfortable with that amount of form and flow?
I think part of it was a byproduct of my just being in the creative world for 15 years, where that was kind of the dynamic. It just always had both of those components. So I think that that was like, I'm so grateful for that experience because I got to experience that for so long. So I actually think that I was actually more structured for a long time, even though I'm like kind of like messy within the structure, if you know me really well. So it's like I'm not like the yeah, I need to go back and like read Atomic Habits again. But like but as I like moved more into like the open-ended, yeah, end of it, like at first it's really, I don't know, I thought it was scary when it was outside of the confines of my computer. Like, and so it was like there's no, like, to say like, why am I doing this thing that doesn't have like an objective, or like there's no, like, is this going to help me, right? So having to decondition myself from that was like, that took, I felt like for a while I was hemorrhaging out that I was deconditioning myself. That the conditioning was hemorrhaging out of me hard for like 3 months. And every time I went to go explore, I felt like I had all that dialogue arise, like, this is a waste of time, like all the things, or like, I don't even know if I enjoy my own company, like all these things. So as I was going to learn how to like, I don't even know what to call it. It's like, because it's such a huge world I ended up entering, like, of creativity, of creating myself, like, and I entered it into so many categories and went deep that like, it's like, I don't even know what to call that world. I think it's like self-actualization, maybe like the space of self-actualizing, because as you go to explore, like in this like open way, like everything ends up emerging through you, and like come and then like without trying. So then it's like it just feels the complete opposite of any kind of structure with any objective. And that has the receiving, the opening, the like allowing, the nothingness has created more things than the structured like container of like, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z now. Like, it's like that was like, that's where suddenly like not only was I emerging, but like workshops were emerging, like all these things just started to like, you don't even have to try to create them in that space. They just like come through that experience. And when I found that world, it felt like such a relief compared to like the other end of it. So, but I do think I try to stay man, you could really just go off on that world. And like, sometimes I do feel like you're just like, I could just go into the forest. Like, I'll be back in 3 years. Like, like, and people go on like really deep expeditions, like, and walkabouts and things like that. So you really can go out really far in that space. And I think it's healthy to do that at any certain points in your life. Um, but yeah, like if I don't stay balanced, like I would just go off and like be like, peace. See you when I see you. Like, and yeah.
It's making me think. I mean, first of all, thank you for speaking to that. I feel like I feel some resonance with you because I also feel like I have a great desire to just go exist in the flow and not have to structure anything. And truthfully, I'm still in a part of my process where like there are some days where I'm like, and now we do need to set some more structure because that is the requirement of the current life that I'm a part of and choosing to be a part of. And that's okay. And how can I bring, how can I keep looking for balance? I'm curious, one of my favorite topics that you talk about, because I think you do it in a way I've not heard anyone else speak about it, is integration and disintegration. And I'm wondering about the parallel between form and flow, integration, disintegration, and in the creative process and what that looks like for you.
Yeah, that does directly tie into this. Cause like when you go out into that space and you're like, lost in the forest or whatever for a long time, like whatever information you gather during that time, I have like a sense of like fullness at some point where you're like, I can't receive anything else. So then it's like, oh, okay, I need to integrate this. Like I need to bring it back. And then I think that's when you can kind of swing back over to the structure and like begin that process. Because if you just stay out there like receiving information, like it gets lost at some point too, because it's like you're just like, this is so much, because there's no like, to me, creativity, like the amount of information that comes into me now because of the way I've been able to open my channel is like a fire hose. So sometimes it can feel very fire hosey, or it can feel like it's like a river flowing and I'm like, there's just like a one after another and I want to like try to grab it, but it's just like, it's just going and going and going. So it's like I could be doing any task and it's just like, here's another thing. It's just like available at all times. So you really do have to go, okay, like I can't receive any more information right now. And then like go and like sit with it. And then there is this like very like masculine aspect to it, which is like, can I create something that actually has like some form? Like, and then you're like, you take that, you form it into something, and then it really does sit in that other space. So that's like kind of the integration aspect of it.
Yeah.
But that doesn't really cover the disintegration, which is like when you're out in this open, vast space, like inevitably you will like break down aspects of yourself. Like it's not like you're just like sitting there like in a chair being like thinking of a story, and like that story then like, I mean, it could be, but like it's like a full on like experience of the evolution of your soul happening. So like that, in that space, like the aspects of yourself that aren't serving you for whatever this next like piece of your journey where you're going to integrate this information, like that starts to decompose. So you start to like, you kind of like almost like you go into like the fall, you go into like a wintering before, and then you kind of go into this space, and then the spring is kind of that other place, that more structured place where you like bring it out into the world, I think.
I'm loving this. This is the first time that I've seen integration as uh, more masculine. And I think that I'm wondering for you personally what it looks like, or where you're putting your awareness or your consciousness in either parts of this process during the decomposing, the disintegration, and then I love to hear as well where how you're bridging right in that little in between, that feeling of fullness, and then what that bridge looks like into the integration output.
Yeah, the for me the fullness is like when I've disintegrated enough that I'm like, who who even am I? When I say that to my friends, that means that like I'm full. Like I'm like
I love that
when
that's
I
the
be
telltale.
yeah. I start to say that. I'm like, here I go again. And like, why? Like, who even am I? What am I even doing? Like, and I'm like, because the aspects have moved, and then I've gotten so much information that I'm like, oh, wait, so this information, some of it just is already like integrating, right? So then you're like, I say I'm like disoriented. It has like a
Mm,
disorienting feel. And then I'm like, don't know what direction to go. And that's where I know I'm like, I've been out in the void, like in that creative realm, like long enough. And then I have to like ground, like there's like a grounding aspect to it, I think. And like coming back to um the integration of it is just like if you stay out, what happens if you stay out there is that it will just keep moving and you will keep morphing so much that like you'll just like either lose some of the information or you just like kind of feel floaty, I think. Like you're just floating all the time. And so then I have to come back and say, okay, like out of all that information that I just received, like what's the thing that like that I feel like aligned with or that I love or I feel like is important. You know, there's different ways to kind of like feel into that. And then it's like you almost have to like capture it so that you're like saying, okay, this is the things I'm going to sit with now. Like because which is like more of the like structured aspect of it. It's like, okay, you have like you hold it. Like it's a
mm.
holding place and you don't if you take in more information then you're like gonna like kind of like lose it again. So like I think you have to hold it long enough and I have this feeling of like I need to ground in these things. And so then I start to like a lot of times I write, which writing helps me ground into them because at first my writing is like disoriented still or it's like just it's full of like questions or paradox or all you can kind of see that it's not even clear too. And so when I start writing through that then it like starts to get to this place of like aha, oh okay, I had these experiences because of this and I can kind of start to begin to see what that is. And then from there I'm like, okay, the point of this is to like ground into this 3D experience with this information. So like I have to think about it from like a human perspective. Like what am I doing with like on a Monday, right? Like it really becomes like really grounded of like then it starts to go into like what how does this affect like what I do, like what I offer, who I am, and how even my like week looks. So that's like it starts to ground and get really granular.
Ooh, ooh. All right. I'm really vibing on this. I'm really vibing on this cycle. And a few things arose for me. One, I'm just seeing this beautiful visual of the infinity loop of like a snake eating its tail, of like the process of going underground and knowing. So for some people, the disorientation is just so incredibly painful. I just want to name that for a lot of people, like not knowing left from right, up from down, being under the wave is just terrible and hard in our culture. In a culture that really like I don't want to say our culture, I'll speak for me. In the culture I was raised in, there was a lot of praise for knowing things, for knowing the answer, for clarity, for predictability, for plans, 5-year plans, 10-year plans. Hell, I think some people are like trying to plan how they're going to die. And it's like, doesn't seem like that's a lot of the mystery experience, but to each their own. And for me, I've always enjoyed the disorientation because it feels real. It feels uh, it feels like it touches the poetic nature of life, which is that everything is ephemeral and changing, and it's sand slipping through your fingers. And somehow being in that part of the process really speaks to my spirit of the sweetness and the grief that go along with all of life constantly changing. So that part I have a reverence for. It's this bridging part of knowing when I'm full and coming back up to the surface. And the image I'm getting is like, I don't know, some kind of like reptile or frog or something that lives both in land and on water, in water, and like coming up to the surface, and that process of reorienting to the world and how this part of the world functions, and being like, whoa, now I don't know where I am. And what I love that you said was like, that's a moment to just pause and hold and ask these questions. And you said, like, what is in alignment? What feels important? What do I love right now? And that's a moment to start kind of threading the needle through the fabric of the unknown and the known. And one of my teachers would say that's like the moment of crisis on stage, where you don't know what's going to happen. And for me, I think pulling in a lot of relaxation and presence, and knowing I'm going to need awareness and consciousness here. I can't like go back underwater. And also a sense of relaxation, though. How can I not become overstimulated by the expectations of how to put this into form or what to make this mean? How can I be patient with this threading process? And I feel like as I see myself trying to move into integrating it into my life, previously I've experienced a lot of overwhelm or overstimulation. And so I love that you brought in this idea of grounding, and what does grounding mean? And I think this might be the first time that, as you were talking about your writing and you were saying, I can see the patterns of like it being full of questions and paradox, to then kind of moving towards, and I don't know if you said this, but so these are my words, like some more clarity or some more like action or some more like, this is what I'm going to do with that. And how important it's been for me to find value in the writing that holds paradox and in the writing that holds action, and to not deify one or the other, but know that like they depend on each other, and both are worth sharing, and both are the art to me. They are the form. They're the bridge. The art is the bridge. Because it helps people in that whole process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think for as far as bridging that, like, I think the thing that can be really complicated is that we have this programming, a lot of us, like, it's just like the dominant culture programming that like we should, we have to take like we have to know, like we have to take action, like that like we decide, and we need to decide, and we need to like go towards it quickly too. Like there's so much like speed associated with it. And then, but really like the other one is like, is it that it would emerge. And so when you feel like you don't know what to do, like the dominant culture programming pulls you into the fear, which is like, and then you start to want to make decisions, but they're actually rooted in fear. But if you sit in the space of going like, if I don't panic and go that direction, that actually it'll become like softly clear, and like then I can just take action on it, but it'll be from a place of love. But you have to know that like sitting in that space, which no one teaches you to sit in that space when you're younger, but like if you sit in it, like I guarantee like the answers will come, because like your higher self like knows. So like as long as you just sit there and you can like, you know, call into your higher self, like you can meditate on it, you can like, and from that space, like the answer is like, it's so much lovelier to go that route. And but it's like, yeah, don't panic though, like that it's actually really a good sign if you like don't know what to do with whatever information that you have. Like it doesn't take that long to get the answer.
Yeah. Yeah, the don't panic, and then also the willingness to, I mean, I have people in my life that are definitely still a part of that programming, that like get there fast, have a plan, stay with what you had said you've been doing. And so for me, a lot of it has also been pulling my energy back in towards myself in those moments, and finding other people who have deconditioned that, who say like pausing in this moment is strong, not knowing is real. That's actually the nature of reality. The other, thinking that you know everything, actually is a form of delusion. And being willing to sit with someone in the unknown. And something I've been thinking about is, as a coach, as someone who's supporting someone, how to help them see where they are in that cycle, because it can be difficult to even know where you are in that process. Do you have a tendency to always live in the doing? Do you have a tendency to kind of hang out in the waves? Are you overly full? Are you having trouble pausing in the panic? Like, what's happening and what is needed? How do you, might be difficult when there's not someone here for you to see in front of you, because I know you're so good at seeing the person in front of you. But what are you attuning to when you're sitting with someone as to help them see where they are in that process?
That's a really great question that I don't know if I have an answer to, because like I can't explain why I can see what I can see, because I think it's like it's just beyond explanation in certain ways. But then also like some of it's actually like just not, you're also just have knowledge, and then you're like can see things from the knowledge that you acquire. So it's like a very it's broad. But I think that it depends on what the person is like wanting to do that they feel like they can't do. Right. And so if they're like out there like really like love floating down the river, like and constantly evolving, but they're like, I can't seem to like get a website up, or like even get my offerings out, right? Then it like, I mean, it's very clear that they could start to kind of balance out on the other end. And then there's like the other people that are like more in the more like structured space. A lot of times they desire to have deeper skills within their like whatever they want to do, which actually means they need to go out and like embody, to go and learn the skills as to practice. And when you practice enough that you become embodied in it, and that's more out in that like the wild west of the creative flow space, right? Or whatever you want to call it. I don't even know what to call it because it's such a vast land. But so yeah, it's like depends on what the person, because they'll tell you, like they'll be like, what they desire or what they feel like is not working, right? And that kind of will show you. And I'm definitely having like a meta experience of myself right now after I said that. I'm like, oh, okay. So yeah, I like being in the creative space. I like, like it's because it's that space like is so rich that
Mm.
it's like just feels like living. Like the creative experience is so good
Mm-hmm.
that I'm like, oh, so like to pull myself back now to a place where I've ground down into it after having to be so much in structure before, like I kind of have a little bit of aversion to wanting to go that way. And so, yeah.
I think you're speaking to something which feels true for me too, which is that the yin, the unknown, the mystery, that world doesn't feel very tainted for me. I think partially because I don't see that that vast experience integrated out into the world a ton. So my experience of it is pretty internal. Um,
Mhm.
and pretty untouched in the sense that it wasn't clouded by a lot of outside expectations. The integration portion, the structure portion, the masculine portion does, I see that a lot on the outside, and I see it done in a way that feels not good. Not good to me, with a lot of rigidity, with a lot of expectation, with a lot of criticism. And so I feel I'm going through the process of, how do I wash clean structure? How do I wash clean integration, and even expectation? Like, how do I have a warm, exciting expectation uh, of how I want something to be? And what's the difference between expectation and vision? And it's like, so much of it is in the tone. And one of the things that is beautiful practitioner Mark shared on a call a couple months ago was that the structures for him were born of the flow. And yet I notice that the the where to put my focus and the tone and the archetype of creating structure involves a little bit more of a rev, a push, a vibrancy than the disintegration process. And how do I have that kind of energy, that force, even that pressure, without it becoming overly tense and strangling or smothering or critical?
Mm. Yeah, so this is something that I'm exploring. I don't know the answer yet, but I do believe that we can create structures that support the like our entire being. So it is like the structure that we create and the way that that gets implemented out in the world. Like I don't think that there's like the right way to do it, even though there is successful ways to do things. And it's like it is almost like staying away from all that noise, that there is actually like a unique way to create it that is going to be supportive of your being, of all of that other aspect of yourself and that wants to explore, but then
Mm.
also like all the layers of yourself, like how much you like to interact with people, how much you like however you want to live, right? Like some people don't want to be on the computer very much and other people, do. So it's I believe there's got to be a unique combination that allows you to be able to bring whatever you want to bring to life out into the world, like in a way that is like supportive to you. And I think it's a list, like you have to actually be listening in that space, like to yourself, and that it is like it's a noisier space. You're right. And so it's like, yeah, what is the balance between like observation of what others are doing. Like, I think it's, yeah, just like you can observe, but there's a lot of other entangled energies that can happen of like, oh, like where you get into comparison or you get into like different things that are like extremely challenging too. So I'm exploring that, trying to find like a unique way that I can be in this that like I love.
I love the idea that the structure can be supportive to all the parts, and that our needs and our desires actually, in their diversity, actually are encouraging us to create, to innovate a system that works for the complexity of us, instead of trying to shut certain parts down and be like, well, it works for these. It's like, no, everybody's got to kind of agree.
Yeah. And I think that it's not the norm because, like, I mean, we went from like, oh, we should probably have sustainable practices to like, oh, there's regenerative practices. And so the same thing goes for your systems within whatever creativity that you're doing, whatever business thing you're doing, right? Like, that business can be regenerative for yourself. And so I think that there isn't like as many examples of that. And so kind of like emergent, I think, a little bit, which is why you like, well, it's emergent in the culture, but it also emerges from yourself because only you know what feels good to you.
I just love that you brought back up that they are not just sustainable, but that they can be an energizing, that it can be an involuting process. It doesn't just have to sustain you. This idea of like everything staying the same all the time, again, isn't real. But something changing and refortifying and falling away and then coming back in a way you didn't expect, like that is the cycle of life.
Yeah, yeah. Because I don't want to live in burnout ever again. So like as a coach, my coaching is so regenerative. It is like it is wild to feel that infinity loop. It's so regenerative. And so it's like, oh, I see. Like everything can be regenerative. Like, sure, do we sometimes push out too much and burn out a little bit or get tired? Sure. But like just overall, we shouldn't be living in a burnout state or just perpetually cycling in and out of it. I think then that means that the way that the structure is set up is just not conducive to for your life long term.
And as far as like getting in touch with what's regenerative, what is giving energy and sustaining and then refortifying, I'd love to just like noodle on how you've done that or how you've supported other people in inventorying what do I like what matters to me, what's the life I want to create if I am feeling disoriented, if I am feeling lost, what can I start to look like, where can I find my North Star?
So first I want to say like, yeah, you'll know that it is like in the pocket when after you did the thing, like you go like, yeah, like I'm living life to the fullest. Like you're like, God, I live the best life. Like this is so good. Like when you feel that feeling of like that's how you want to live and that's what you're doing, that it's aligned with that, like you just know. So I feel like everybody experiences those things like in life. And so like I think we have some orientation towards like that. But I think a lot of the times maybe it's oriented a little bit more towards like entertainment, like that more like on the disassociative end. Like we have fun when we're not at doing this work. But actually like I think when we're doing our work, like the regenerative like fun is actually like it doesn't peak as high like you do like if you're going on like a like going to have a peak experience, but like but it's more about like that middle, sitting in that middle and like just feeling like good and being okay with that. But yeah, if you're just like, I mean, yes, definitely people will ask me, and the world seems to be asking themselves I I don't even know what I should do. Like, like trying to find like, I don't even know what I love, or I don't even know what I want to do or whatever. That is like there's like 100 different ways to go into that, where like, which then could be like frustrating for the person, like, well, there's 100 and I can't even find one of them. So, but like, I mean, I think everybody's probably heard people say like, what did you love to do as a child? Like, how were you as a child? Like, if you had enough positive experience as a child where you can tune into that, that's like a great place, I think, to go. Like, because if you can tap into the essence of what you were like as a child, like that essence, like whether it's like buried now, wants to be like unburied and wants to emerge.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's like a simple one, but
I like that one. I also like something I've been alchemizing since I just got done with grad school is there were a lot of aspects of that system that I felt pretty enraged about. And I notice a lot of people feel angry about the way things are in our world, and I'm with you. And I notice that if I get curious about what makes me angry, there's usually a vision or a desire or a clarity that I have about how I want things to be and what matters to me. So that polarity is actually pulling me. If I don't hang out in the complaining spot, which I certainly have, but if I allow it to point out what's underneath, what desire is not being met, that can be an interesting spot. And the other one I like, I think we did this in your coaching container, was writing a letter or an epitaph. And like at the end of my life about what mattered to me, and what I was really proud of. And all of these exercises I found great. Like, I love writing, and then I also really loved being in the feeling of the vision, or the feeling of the beautiful memories, or the feeling of the childlike freedom, and just spending some time there, letting new from those parts of me that already know, letting those parts start to expand into the parts of me that are uncertain.
Yeah, I'll add one more,
please,
which is like, normally you're like your greatest childhood wound. It's like, it's in there. So like, it's really annoying. But like, yeah, like the thing that you like kind of is on a loop with you, like, oh, when I was a child, like my mom perceived me as this way, and like because of that, like it caused X, Y, and Z. Like, and so I had the story about myself, like, in that story, when I alchemized it, like it turns from like it's your shadow, and then it turns into your light. And so sometimes your shadow actually like it's in there too. Like it's brutal.
Yes, it is.
And it's not necessarily like your innate characteristics that you're like portraying out in the world, like that seem like they just came from like birth. It's like, can be like, because the universe is so complex, it like for example, like in high school I was in sports, and I was like trained by coaches to be savage, right? And so I got rewarded for being savage, for being, quote, like mean on the soccer field, like. And so my mom thought I was mean, Cause like she didn't want me to play sports. Like she like kind of had this like idea that I was mean. And so I held, I mean, it was my mother, so I held it, right? And then like later, I had all this shame about it. And so, but then like when I realized that like when I alchemized that, I have an intense amount of core strength inside of me. Like it's like energy. Oh, it was just energy. And it's like, oh, it's intense. I have intense energy in there. And then what is that intense energy supposed to be doing? Like helping other people liberate themselves.
Yeah.
So like when you like alchemize that trauma, like it's so clear like that's what I'm here to do. And it was like totally right there in the childhood trauma.
Yes. Yes. Thank you for bringing that in. And we are going to need your intensity to alchemize and move to collective freedom. We are going to need that.
Yeah.
I'm aware of our time, and I have like a fun little kind of kitschy game that we could go out on.
Yeah, let's do it.
Creativity to you in 3 words. What is creativity?
It's my life.
Now I'm hearing, it's my life. It's now or never. I ain't gonna live forever. Am I? I don't know. I don't know if I'm gonna live forever. I might. The hell?
What about you?
Creativity is freedom and flow.
Yeah, that sounds nice.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Wow. So good to spend this time with you today.
I loved it. This talk about a part of my dharma and alignment and vision. This is right in the pocket.
Beautiful. All right. Well, we'll do it again.
Stay tuned.
All right. Bye.
Bye.